Hey again, travel bosses. I'm excited to bring you this week's sponsor, TripStreak, the smarter travel search. What I love about TripStreak is the ability to set your personal preferences to either have or avoid red-eye flights or have things like completely lie flat seats. So the next time you need to book a flight, check out tripstreak.com/travel-like-a-boss.
Welcome to the Travel Like a Boss podcast, the radio show all about traveling like a boss by being your own boss. Stay tuned for weekly interviews featuring guests that have built their own online businesses. If you would like to have access to our entire back catalog, visit travellikeabosspodcast.com for instant access. And here's your host, Johnny SD.
Hey, what's up? This is Johnny, and welcome to episode 166 of the Travel Like a Boss podcast. I am in Lviv, Ukraine, with Ryan Murfield.
Hey, 166. You've done a lot.
A lot of traveling.
Holy buckets.
And so have you.
Yeah.
And that's why we're on the show.
That's right.
So you are originally from South Dakota.
South Dakota.
And what happened? What made you start traveling?
So that's a good question. I think when I was in college, I just always thought, man, I need to go somewhere. I came from a family that mostly lived in South Dakota. We would do kind of like the standard trip, Black Hills, maybe Disneyland once in a while. But I thought it just always was kind of a dream to go somewhere.
Did you grow up in a big city or a small town?
Small town, Brookings, about 20,000 people. And so just kind of in a cornfield in eastern South Dakota. And I'd always thought that it would be nice to travel, but it was expensive to get out of the country. So I looked for ways to get out for free or for somebody that would do it for me.
Because I would imagine that traveling from South Dakota is even harder than traveling from, let's say, California, because we can fly from San Francisco or LAX pretty much to, anywhere in the world, maybe one stop. But for South Dakota, you would first have to fly to one of the coasts before you can even hop on an international flight, right?
Right. And we're kind of like a hub away from a hub. So we have Sioux Falls that kind of has an airport. Otherwise, it's a 4 or 5 hour drive to Minneapolis. And from Minneapolis, you still have to go to like Chicago or someplace farther out. So it's not easy. We're a dead center of the country.
So someone actually mentioned to me that everyone they meet while traveling that's from the U.S. is from San Francisco or LA, maybe New York. And my theory is that when you're from these three cities and you want to go on vacation, you're like, okay, well, where should I go internationally? While people that live in the middle of the country, when they think about going on vacation, they're like, oh, let's go to California for vacation. Let's go to Florida.
Oh, yeah. Like New York is exotic for us. A lot of my relatives have never been to New York. They'll say things like, I don't think I want to go there. I think it's crazy. Like New York is this mystical place or something.
So how do your friends and family feel about your life now that, do you ever go back to the small town in South Dakota?
Yeah, my wife and I, we go back every summer. As we're teachers, we get the summer off, so we go home, check on everybody. They think it's cool. They wish we were around a little bit more, but, they like it.
Do any of them ever envious that you have this life?
I don't think so. Especially not parents anyway. They like being where they're at. Some of them will come see us, but I don't think so.
I actually have that feeling too. There are a lot of people who are very comfortable.
Yeah.
And they're just like, nah, it's not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I used to judge them in the beginning when I first started traveling, thinking like, oh man, like, you're so close-minded. Why don't you want to adventure more? And then all the cliches like, if you've never traveled, it's like reading the first page of a book. But now I think I kind of understand why some people are like, I'm sure there's other great cultures, other things to do, but I enjoy being a homebody.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I actually just had the conversation 2 days ago about my wife was talking about somebody that she knew that didn't like to travel. And we were kind of talking about how sometimes that's just people's thing. Like traveling is kind of our thing, but other people have something different that gets them out of bed in the morning. And so that's what they do.
Yeah. And I think that if it's not your thing, it's okay. But I think the only time I judge people is when it is their thing, but then they make excuses because they're afraid.
Yeah.
And I think, it'd be the same for the exact opposite, where if someone's thing was just, they really wanted to start a family, but they're afraid to, so they keep traveling, that's not good either. But if somebody is is content and happy where they are.
Yep.
That's completely fine. But I think the people are like, oh, I wish I could, but it's never a good answer.
Yeah, you just gotta be who you are. Follow your dreams.
So you said that you wanted to travel, you wanted to be able to live abroad in college, and then how did you figure that out?
So like I said, I was looking for somebody to pay for my trip because I didn't have money. So it started with a summer camp. I did a summer camp in New Hampshire, and it was this international summer camp. So half the counselors were from the state and half were from all over the world. And that was this awesome, eye-opening experience to, oh my gosh, look at all these cool places I can go to. And so I did that for a few years and then started finishing college up, didn't want to get a job. So I had to start looking for my next free ride, if you could say it. And I stumbled upon Peace Corps. I had been applying for a few things and I put in an application for Peace Corps also, which is a really long application process, but that kind of panned out. And that landed me in Ukraine for 27 months.
When you say long application, how long did it take?
I think from the time I first applied to when I arrived in Ukraine, it was 9 months.
Okay. And what was the process of that?
First, you have to fill out about a mountain of paperwork that lets them know everything there is to know about you. And then you have to do a phone interview. Between those, there's a lot of waiting. After the phone interview, there's a lot of waiting. And then they'll get a hold of you and tell you that you made it to the next level, which means you have to do a bunch more paperwork. And then you have to do another interview. And then towards the end, when they're pretty sure you're going to go, then there's a lot of doctor's visits. The doctor has to check out everything possible. You have to go to an eye doctor. He has to check out everything. And then when you're all done with it, they give you an envelope in the mail that says, okay, you're going to go to blank and you're going to do blank.
Wow, so it's like a complete gamble. You have no say in where you want to go.
Yeah, and then you can do that or you can do something else, but that's it.
So you can say no to it and they'll put you back into the drawing, or how does that work?
No, you can say no and then you can get a different job.
Okay.
So that's it. You can take it or leave it.
And if you said no, then would you have to wait a long time again to get another offer?
Yeah, and well, you might not get another offer because they want somebody that's going to be open-minded to new experiences, isn't able to go with it, and so I think somebody that's picky about where they're going to go for Peace Corps is probably a good sign that they're not the type of person that they want to do that anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I've always heard of the term Peace Corps, but I had no idea what it was until I asked you over coffee just 10 minutes before this.
Yeah,
I actually, for some reason, thought it would had something to do with either, and these are two very extreme opposites, either military or like what is it called when like churches go to different countries and try to get people missionary work.
Yeah,
but is it either of those at all?
It's neither.
Okay.
So I said during coffee, and I'll say the Peace Corps has 3 goals. It's a government program. You always serve for 27 months, so you have 3 months of job and language training. They teach you the language of wherever you're going to go, and then you serve for 2 years. And the big thing of the project is it has 3 goals. The first one is to help a developing country with an area of need. The second one is to kind of put a happy face on the American culture, spread awareness of American culture, kind of be that guy. So when people see something happens in the news with America, they think, oh yeah, I remember that nice American guy who lived with us for 2 years. They're okay people. And then the third goal is the other side of that, to come back to America after you've lived in your home country and kind of be a spreader of awareness of that culture.
That actually makes sense. And I had no idea it was a government organization. Mm-hmm. But I guess that does make sense, where you guys are almost kind of like the ambassadors of the country.
Yeah. I think it's really effective. It's peacekeeping strategy. The idea is, you're going to be less likely to be for going to war with somebody if you think, oh yeah, well I lived in their village, or oh, my friend lived in their village and he had all these great things to say about them. It puts a good personal touch on the foreign country.
Yeah, it makes sense. So when you're sent to this village in Ukraine, do you have, like, what are your responsibilities there?
So that depends on what your job is. Peace Corps has this wide range. I was an English teacher, so I went to the local public school and taught English, but other people help with medical issues. There's agriculture volunteers that help communities become more efficient in agriculture. There's people that go to an island somewhere and help with the marine biology, maybe coral reef preservation. There's all kinds of jobs. It all depends on, Peace Corps only goes where they've been invited by a foreign country. The foreign country kind of says, hey, we would like some volunteers that will do this. And then we do it.
Okay, cool. So you list down your skills during the assessment, and they see if you can be a good fit somewhere, if you can add some value to that country.
Right. So I had a teaching certificate, and I thought it would be cool to do, whatever. I actually wasn't even that excited about teaching at that time, but they said, hey, you're going to be a teacher.
You said, okay.
I said, okay, because you can either say okay or you can get lost. So
okay. So then what happens next? Do they pay for your flight, or do you have to pay for your own flight?
They pay for your flight. And then once you're in the country, you're kind of taken care of. So when I was a volunteer in Ukraine, we got a $200 a month stipend, which wasn't very much, but it's about as much as the average person makes where you live. Because they don't really want an American coming there and then kind of rolling in and spending money and showing off. You're supposed to kind of live like they do. Live like a local. Or otherwise it's sort of difficult to integrate. They take care of all your medical stuff. So you get a dentist, doctor checkups. If you have anything that happens, they cover it. If you hurt yourself, there were some volunteers that got flown to Thailand because they had one guy broke his face and had to have some facial reconstruction surgery.
Do you know how that happened?
Slipped on the ice.
Wow.
We had a lot of people come to Ukraine. They weren't used to the ice and snow. So there's a few months at the beginning of every winter where the new volunteers, there's always a few that hurts themselves.
That smash their face.
Yeah, smash their face or whatever.
Well, maybe that's the benefit that you're from South Dakota.
Yeah, not an issue for me.
What is it like living in a place either in South Dakota or Ukraine during the winter?
I don't know. Kind of isolating. It's cold. Our Fargo winters, I lived in Fargo too. That was super cold. So was Ukraine. I don't know. You find something inside that you like to do. Roll with it.
Wow. Okay. Really good. I really like Ukraine during the summers.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot imagine being here in the winter.
It's a different place in the winter. Summer is lovely. Green, lush, awesome. In the wintertime, it's dark because we're pretty far north. So the sun goes down around 4 o'clock. Comes up pretty late in the morning, so it's a lot of dark, a lot of cold. Yeah, like I said, you got to find something inside you like to do.
And what was that?
So I'm actually I'm a banjo player, and I played banjo for quite a few years before I came to Ukraine, but I got really good in Ukraine because I sat and played banjo for about an hour a day. When the weather got better, I got into running, had a lot of extra time.
I think by the banjo comment, people were probably thinking you were in your 60s, but how old are you?
I'm 31.
And you've lived a full life.
Pretty full. Yeah.
And you're married.
Married.
You met your wife through Peace Corps.
I did. So when we flew to Ukraine, they fly you out in groups, and we were a group 40th group to go to Ukraine. And so we met, they get us all together in Washington, D.C. the day before they fly us out, to kind of give you a crash course of hey, you're going to go to this foreign country. Things are going to be weird. Here's what you need to know.
And all 4 of you were going to go to Ukraine?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
we were all going to go to Ukraine together. And I met her right at the beginning of that meeting.
And where was she from?
She's from North Dakota.
So you guys are that close.
Actually, I think we lived probably closer together for most of our lives before we were married than we did in Ukraine. She lived on the other side of the country. So it was about a 30-hour trip to get to her, about a 24-hour train, and then some buses on either side.
That's insane. So you met literally the day before you're going to move to this country.
Yeah.
And you decided to date long distance from across the country.
Yeah, not right away. I had a girlfriend when I first went into Peace Corps, but then a little bit later, I didn't have a girlfriend anymore. And then I did again. I
think word of wise to everyone is if you're going to leave for 27 months anywhere, you should probably not be in that relationship.
No, the rate of success on that one's pretty low. Pretty low. I don't know if I can think of anybody that managed to date long distance the whole time.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's not going to work.
Okay, so you're living in this little village in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, actually, so I'm curious. Were there, I think some people dream about, living in this little village and then having the beautiful farmer's daughter or the girl next door want to marry you and move back to the U.S. Did that happen at all?
Not to me.
Okay.
There's a handful of guys that I knew that came home with Ukrainian wives. There's a couple that are still here with their wives that they met during Peace Corps. So it happened, but it didn't happen.
Are you still friends with these guys?
There's a couple. There's not anybody that I keep in touch with. No. But, we're Facebook friends, so it seems.
I'd be so curious to see what their lives are like. If they're like, that was the best thing ever happened. I'm so happy now. I'm living in Ukraine. Or if it was like, oh, what did I do with my life?
Came with a little bit of regrets. What was I thinking? I don't know. That's a great question.
I've met a lot of older guys, almost always from England for some reason, that have married Thai women, and now they're living there. They have a kid,
right?
And they're kind of just stuck, and they don't seem very happy because most of the time, I don't know exactly what it is, but I think the reason why they're unhappy now is because they kind of want to go back home and have a normal life again, but they don't have a career anymore. They don't make enough money to live anywhere but Thailand or a cheap place like that. And to move a family is expensive. Like just going back by yourself to England is expensive.
Yeah.
But to have your Thai wife and your kid, it's pretty much impossible in this situation.
That'd be tough to make the jump.
So now they're kind of just stuck and they're like, all right, well, that was fun in my 20s, coming to Thailand, hooking up with the Thai girl and, not speaking the language, not really using culture, but now they're like embedded and they're like, okay, that's it.
They wanted a younger wife. And now their younger wife is older.
Yeah. I mean, she might still be 5 years younger.
Right.
But 5 years younger when you're, 25 and she's 20 is very different than when you're 45 and she's 40.
Yeah. They were all the same age with the people in Ukraine because we were all most of the volunteers with Peace Corps. They're usually right out of college, or at least in Peace Corps they were. There's always some that have done other things. We actually had the oldest volunteer in the world with us. I think he was in his 80s.
Wow.
And so he had lived his full life. He'd retired. He must have been retired for a while, and then he came and did Peace Corps. And there was a couple married couples, and they came after they retired. And it was kind of cool to see because we're young and we didn't have any job experience, and we were kind of getting it there. These people came into their communities with a full life's worth of career experience, and they really took off. They had all kinds of projects going. They were getting grants. They were funding this. They were doing that. It was really cool to see what they did.
I think that's pretty cool. I think that's a nice alternative. I mean, one of the whole points of this podcast is not just to talk about, the cool travels and where to go, what to eat, because that's fun. But a lot of it is just the alternative lifestyles where people can, either figure out a way to work remotely, or in this case, actually, you basically are working remotely for the Peace Corps, where they're taking care of your rent, your food, and you're able, kind of, no matter where you are in life. So if you guys are unhappy with your jobs and you're like, I'm so sick of this career, I want to do something different, but I don't know what to do. Yeah. You can take 27 months off.
Take 27 months off. I would say that I feel like, so since Peace Corps, I've moved to Seoul. I teach at an international school there, and I like Seoul. I love the work that I do. But I think as far as a cultural experience, Peace Corps might have kind of ruined me or set the bar pretty high. Because I don't think you can get a better cultural experience because you learn the language of where you're going to be the first 3 months, and then Peace Corps puts you in a community where you're the only American that lives in some kind of small community, and so you don't have
crutches to fall back on.
The crutches of your other friends, like you're in it, So you're speaking the language, you're hanging out with the people, you're going to their birthday parties, you're celebrating their holidays with them. You're full time in that culture.
And you're pretty much an invited guest of the government. Yeah, which is I think that's cool, especially because they know you're helping out their local community, their local village.
Yeah. You're usually kind of a little celebrity in your town. Everybody knows. Oh yeah, there's an American in this town. He's Ryan. He looks like this. He's, so kind of fun.
He looks like the only white guy here.
Yeah, he looks like
I guess they're all white in Ukraine.
Yeah, they're all white in Ukraine, but you can tell who's the American in town. Yeah. We dress a little different. I have red hair. They don't have red hair.
I can imagine that. Yeah. So the first 3 months when you're learning the language, where were you based?
Just outside of Kyiv, a little town. Oh, this is good. It was a town called Stary Bezradichi, which literally translates to old without happiness. It's right next to New Without Happiness.
Is that a real place?
That's a real place. They're right next to each other.
Oh, wow. And are these happy towns or no?
I didn't think it was that bad. But they're tiny. You know, there's just a couple hundred people. You're not totally alone then. I had this group. There were 4 of us. And we would go do language lessons every day for 3 or 4 hours. And then we would have 3 or 4 hours of, I don't know, a couple hours of homework. And we would all go home to separate host families that didn't speak English. So you really get like inundated with language learning because you have your lessons and then, okay, now it's time to eat. If you want to eat, you have to speak the language.
I felt that way when I was doing a homestay in Guatemala.
Yeah.
Where everybody there in that family only spoke Spanish. And it was so awkward during our first lunch together because I couldn't even say like paso tortilla, you know, and that afternoon during my like hour of private tutoring, I said, hey, can we just not do grammar for today? Can you just tell me how to talk to my house? Like 2 basic things. Yeah. And my Spanish improved drastically just in 1 week. So I can imagine, you know, being there for months. Yeah. It really helped. You know, after that was done, we were ordering train tickets on our own. We were doing all kinds of stuff. It was impressive. So you can speak Ukrainian now. I can't speak it as well as I could 5 years ago, but I can speak some Ukrainian. That's cool. Yeah. How would you say travel like a boss? Boss. Подорожувати як full of some Ukrainians going to listen to this and laugh at me. That sounds awesome. Yeah. I like that. Oh yeah, you were saying about the host family. I remember one of the kind of loneliest feelings we just got to. This has to do with my first host family not being able to speak to them. You get into your country in Ukraine, and I think we had one night where they put us all up. I don't know, at some little retreat center. They kind of gave us the basics of like, okay, here's a crash course in Ukrainian culture in a couple hour session, and we did like a really quick. Here's how to say, hi, how are you? My name is, lesson in Ukrainian. And then they put us all on a bus and they sent us to our families that we were going to live with by ourselves for 3 months. I remember sitting on that bus thinking like, oh man, I'm in it now. I'm like, here we go. And they drop you off. There's the family. They take your bags. You get in the car. And now like, I cannot say a single word to these people. Did you write it down or were you like memorizing in your head? Well, I mean, I had kind of had the hi, how are you? And you know, I half said it, half mumbled it, but past that, I didn't know anything. So what do you think it sounded like when the first time you said it? You know, like hello is dobry den in Ukraine. I don't know. I probably said like I had a bunch of marbles in my mouth or minizvati Ryan is how to say my name is. You know, I think you're kind of nervous. So you kind of butcher it. Yeah. Okay. So what was the family like? I mean, who was living in that house? There was this nice family. It was two boys. One, I think, was in probably 10th or 11th grade, and one was in 6th or 7th grade, and their parents. And then they had this big German Shepherd, Rudy. I really like Rudy. Rudy and I both can speak Russian or Ukrainian, so we identified with each other. That family owned a little shop in their village. Real nice people. I'm excited. I'm going to go see them in a few days. The son that was in 6th or 7th grade, he spoke the most English. I think after about a month and a half of Ukrainian lessons, my Ukrainian was then better than his English. So kind of an idea of what we had to work with at first. But he did know some things. Yeah. It was probably good that he didn't speak that much English because it forced you to learn Ukrainian. Yeah, some people's language learning experience was kind of ruined because they had somebody in their house that spoke English. And they would translate for them. Yeah. What made this family want to host you? Well, not you in general, but a volunteer. That's a good question. We had been trying to puzzle this because there were 4 of us in this town, and we started to notice there were some connections with our families, and I think all 4 of our families were kind of friends with the principal of the school that we were teaching at. So I think Peace Corps had contacted their school, and she had probably talked to them. My guess is like the family's sons were learning some English, so they thought maybe that would be cool. I think they just thought it would be a fun experience, probably for their kids to have a foreigner in the house. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. And would the money go to the family, or would Peace Corps pay for them? Peace Corps paid them a little bit for like
for the food that they made for us, and then I think a little bit on top of that.
And how was the food in the house?
Oh, it was great. Like, one of my favorite things about Ukraine is the food. And so my host family's food was awesome. Ukrainian food is lovely, especially for us Midwesterners. I don't know if it's the same from California, but we really like our meat and potatoes, and that's almost exactly like what Ukrainian food is, real savory, heavy stuff. So I really like that. Sometimes there would be like some weird things. Ukraine has a few kind of like weird quirks in their food. Like a real common breakfast would be like mashed potatoes with like what looked like a hot dog in it. And that threw us off, kind of a heavy breakfast. They're big into, it's called salo. Have you had any salo yet?
What is that?
It's cured pig fat.
I think I had that on my last trip, and you eat it with bread, right?
Yeah. Usually you'll eat it on top of black bread. Sometimes you'll put a hunk of garlic on it. Usually you eat it to chase vodka.
I actually had that at a Polish bar, like a traditional Polish bar last year. But I guess Poland and Ukraine share some similarities, especially where we are now in Lviv, because they're just right next to each other.
Interesting. My village has a real strong connection with Poland because back in Stalin's time, he didn't want the satellite countries of the Soviet Union holding on to their own nationality. He wanted everybody to be Soviet. So he rounded up everybody that was in the village I lived, Monastreyska, put them on a train and sent them to Poland. At the same time, he rounded up everybody in this Polish village and sent them to Monastreyska. So then he could say, aha, Monastreyskians, that's how he would say it, you are no longer Ukrainian, now you're Polish because you live in Poland. And then from this other country in Poland, you are now Ukrainian. So now you're not from your country, you're from the Soviet Union.
Oh, wow. So the family that you stayed with, did they have heritage in Poland?
Yeah. So this fast forwards now. I talked a little bit about the family that I was with for the training that was near Kyiv. And then after the 3 months, they move you to where you will be for 2 years. And so I was in
2 years.
2 years.
You know what's insane is when you said 27 months, that didn't register in my head.
Yeah, it's a long time.
I'm just like, oh yeah, it's just, a bunch of months.
Yeah,
and when
that's
you say
2 years.
2 years, that is a huge part of your life.
Yeah. It's, like that's 2 Christmases, 2 Easters, 2 birthdays, 2 everything.
In this small village in the middle of Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And I remember during training, it was real daunting. You're like, oh man, what am I going to do for 2 years? But it was great. Like, honestly, that was probably 2 of my favorite years that I've ever had. It was wonderful.
Wow.
Partially because I really liked where I lived, and I had this good feeling about what I was doing. And also there was a bunch of great, I have to say, because my wife was one of them, but and there's a bunch of great other American volunteers close by, and we had this kind of tight-knit group, and we got together. We did a lot of, besides just hanging out, we did a lot of we put on day seminars, and we did this and that for each other's schools. We put on a little camp during the summer for the kids. So we did a lot of good projects, and the friendships I made there also was really cool.
Was that a side project you did, or was that part of the Peace Corps?
Part of Peace Corps. You have your primary job, and most of ours was to teach English, and then they say secondary job, you have to pick your secondary task, and it's really just kind of side projects you do. Nobody made us do those, but we just kind of did.
So what was your secondary task or job?
We did a handful of things. Like I said, we put on this summer camp. 2 summers we were there. We kind of started it. So it was a healthy lifestyles camp in English. So the kids could go for 4 or 5, 6 days, and they would get English that they could practice all the time. And then we also kind of took that as an opportunity to teach about some kind of social, healthy lifestyles, things that we were noticing in Ukraine, smoking is big and drinking is big. And sometimes that's kind of part of being a man in Ukraine. You smoke and you drink. And so we kind of used the camp to kind of address some things like that, healthy lifestyles stuff. Other volunteers, they worked with the GLOW program, which is Girls Leading Our World, which helps kind of teach girls that they can be strong and independent, and they don't need to live their life trying to serve or impress men, which is a great lesson for any girls, but Ukrainian girls in particular. I think that was good for them. There was a lot of AIDS prevention. Ukraine has kind of a big AIDS problem, so they were working with that. All kinds of stuff.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And it's almost kind of like, I don't want to say you're forced to become really close with the other volunteers, but especially if there's only 4 of you in this village,
Right.
you just end up naturally spending a lot of time with them.
Right. So, yeah, that first training village, there was 4 of us. Then for 2 years, I was the only American in my town, but there was others close by. I think the closest person was maybe an hour away, but within 3 or 4 hours, there was probably 10 or so other volunteers.
And how often would you meet up with the other volunteers?
I bet that we got together on average probably every other weekend. And most of the time it was because we were doing projects and so sometimes it would be a small version of that summer camp. Like, okay, on Saturday, we're going to have a little thing for my school. We're going to teach lessons about this or that or whatever. It's going to be an English day for the kids. So we would all go down there. We would put on the seminar and then hang out.
Okay. And in your personal life, when you started dating your now wife,
yeah,
how far away did she live from your village? And was she also in a village too?
She was in a village, maybe smaller. She was in Crimea, which is now kind of been taken over by Russia. So we lived about 30 hours apart, 24-hour train, and then some buses on either end. There's a funny story that I tell. One week, school got called off for the whole week because the temperature was so cold. And I thought, like, well, I'm not going to sit around in my village. I'll go see her. And I got at the end of my train ride, and they said that buses weren't running to her village. So I took a bus to the closest village, and I thought I'd wing it. And I got out of the bus, and there was nothing. And I stood around trying to hitchhike, and I couldn't feel my feet, and it was bad. And I finally got somebody to pick me up. And they saw this American that had I was kind of at their whim. So I think I ended up paying kind of a pretty price to get somebody to drive me, but they did it, and I kept all my toes, and I made it.
That's good. Yeah, I'm sure whatever you paid was cheaper than frostbite.
Yeah, cheaper than frostbite. I didn't pay a toll.
I actually had to do something not as bad because it was during the summer, but we had to find a way from Moldova to Ukraine last summer. And for whatever reason, we just couldn't find trains or even really buses. And I think they did exist. It just wasn't direct, or it wasn't it just wasn't a good route.
Right.
And I guess not that many people for whatever reason, just travel between those two countries. So we had to just find a random driver, and it was so hard to even just talk to them. And I think he actually didn't even show up. He sent a friend of his instead in a different car. Yeah. And he drove us there, and it took 6 hours or whatever. Didn't speak, much English at all. And it was just I think it was just an interesting drive.
I always think it's fun traveling around here because, any guy in his car can be a taxi. I don't think there's that many official taxis. It's just, even from the airport last night, it was a guy.
Really?
In a car, yeah. It just kind of took him. I think I would have been scared if I hadn't lived here for a while and known, because it's just kind of, you get kind of like some old guy, and he's just sitting there smoking cigarettes, and he's kind of grunting at you, or, he's got that kind of stone face. But I think if I had been my first trip to Ukraine, I would have been scared. But I thought, I'm home. These are my people.
I'm curious, how much did you pay for the taxi?
I paid him 200 hryvnia, which is $8.
I think you got ripped off.
And I remember walking out of the airport and thinking, okay, what do I think I should pay a taxi? Because the prices have changed since I've been here. Because the hryvnia, it was $1 was 8. When I used to be here, now it's 1 to 26. So it's really gone down. And I thought, well, it's 10 o'clock when I'm in PM. I don't want to sit there and haggle with him, because 200 hryvnia is $8, and it's my ride to the airport. So I told myself, okay, if the guy says 200, I'll take 200. Probably if he says 200, it's probably more than he's going to charge a Ukrainian that walks out of the airport, but whatever, I'll do it.
Were there not official taxis around when you landed?
No. Were there when you landed?
Yeah, it was a ton.
Oh.
But it was during the day. So maybe that was the difference.
Yeah, could have been different.
So I paid 2 hryvnia.
Yeah.
For the bus.
For the bus.
And if anyone wants to quickly look up that exchange rate, press pause and look it up, and your mind will be blown. I actually sent a WhatsApp message to my buddy Chris, who I'm meeting out here in about a month.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I just paid 2 UAH for my bus from the from the airport to the city center. Google the conversion. And at first he was like, no, just tell me what it is. And I just ignored his message, knowing that
check it out.
he'd be curious. And when you Google it, it is 0.077 cents.
It's like nothing. Another thing you should Google is the great trolleys they have around Lviv. That's kind of one of their, I don't know, that's like one of their icons of Lviv is the trolleys that go around. They're cool.
Almost kind of like a San Francisco trolley that people spend, $4 to ride the cable car. Yeah. Here it is 7.7 cents.
Yeah, Was it as smooth as the San Francisco cable cars?
It was actually probably better.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Nice.
The only funny thing about it is when you get on, first, for whatever reason, the bus driver won't take your money. He's like, just get on. So you get, and then come up to the front as I'm driving. You're like, okay, right? So maybe they're trying to save some time. But while he's driving, you're handing him money. He has to like make change, give you the ticket. And I'm like, this is not efficient at all. First off, he looks like he's going to get into an accident because he's like swerving while trying to do this. They're like 30 people trying to go to the front with their luggage, just trying to squeeze their way to the front. And then I'm like, this would have been so much faster if you just had people board one-on-one, one by one. He would have spent 2 minutes at the airport, but then he wouldn't have to deal with giving change while trying to drive.
My favorite thing, instead of people fighting towards the front of the bus, I remember a bunch of times where people would just, from the back of the bus, they would pass their money up, and then everybody had to pass it to the next person. The bus driver would make change, and then everybody would pass the money back to the guy at the end of the bus.
I like that.
Yeah.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
That makes a lot of sense. It was funny because just you're passing your money up, but always worked out.
Well, as a travel tip for Lviv, for anyone who's coming,
they
have Uber now.
They have Uber.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is really cool because this is not a big, I guess it's a medium-sized city.
Yeah.
But people don't really think of Ukraine as a first world country or a place that would have Uber. Mm-hmm. But they didn't have Uber in Germany because of all the freaking regulations. They don't even have Uber in a lot of the U.S., like in Austin.
Oh, really?
I don't know if in South Dakota they have it.
There's nobody in South Dakota that doesn't have a car, so it's fine.
But I mean, that actually makes more sense in places like South Dakota. That means every single person in South Dakota can now have a second job.
Driving around.
Right. And the people that go there to visit family or for, on vacation for whatever reason, they have a way to get around. Because I'm sure your public transport system's not very good.
We don't have one.
Yeah, see? So it's almost like a necessity.
Yeah.
And I checked the price. The official Uber rate from the airport to the city center is 68.
68.
Yeah,
oh, man. Well, that guy did well.
Yeah. So you paid about 3 times what it should have been.
But, I think this is a good opportunity to talk about, if you were going to talk about like alternative lifestyles or good travel tips, I think we should talk about the perks of seeing Lviv.
Okay.
For one, like we touched on, like Lviv right now is so cheap. I think you've noticed this too. We both ate earlier today separately. You had breakfast. I had lunch at like the top rated restaurant in town. And I had...
Well, first let's describe the ambience of this place.
Oh, yeah.
It's right in the city center.
Yeah.
So imagine like, Times Square, New York or something, right. Or like, one of the big centers in San Francisco. You walk in and it's a beautiful white tablecloth restaurant. Mm-hmm. I sat in the garden, assuming in the back as you as well.
No, they put me on like in one of the rooms.
Okay.
Which was also like lavishly decorated, like fancy tablecloths. All the waiters are in, I think, vests and ties. They're very like formal waiters, like they kind of do the fine dining thing.
Definitely fine dining style. We had a live pianist.
Oh, nice.
Person playing piano for you guys. And I was sitting in the garden that was glass all over, so it was like temperature specific. They had like, exotic birds chirping, singing along to the piano.
Live birds?
Live birds.
No way.
Yeah.
I want to see this garden.
Tomorrow morning, we'll go for brunch.
Tomorrow morning. Okay.
All right. How was your food?
Oh, so my food was excellent. I got sausages with onions, but it comes. They give you this cutting board, It's got a strip of like this Ukrainian embroidery traditional cloth, and then there's 2 plates on it. And so I got sausage with these onions, and the sausage was excellent. And I ordered it was a ganoush, but I think what it really was it was a form of golubsi, which is a pretty traditional Ukrainian food. It's steamed cabbage wrap, and then on the inside it's usually some kind of meat. This one had a lot of mushrooms, and they had a really good mushroom sauce on the top, and it was great.
They're big on mushrooms here.
They're big on mushrooms here, and they do
And
them
they're
well.
good mushrooms.
They're really good.
They're not like I actually don't like mushrooms in the U.S. that much. Cause
No, they don't have that much flavor.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like when you get mushrooms in the U.S., it's kind of like what you get on a pizza. You know, they're kind of just there. You know? And if they get soggy, they're kind of just soggy things. But here, you're right. They taste like they're picked from the forest.
They probably were. The thing, like, Ukrainians don't like stuff that was made in they like the fresh stuff, and most of them, that's what they eat. And so they can tell. So your restaurants are going to have the good ingredients.
I think it was you that mentioned that 70% of Ukrainians have access to homegrown food in their gardens.
Yeah, somebody else had said that statistic, but I think that's true. If you go around the villages, everybody that's not in big cities like Lviv, they all have a garden.
But even here, just a few blocks away,
Yeah.
we saw on the Lviv free walking tour, it was by Lviv Buddy, if you guys want to check them out. They showed us this little market where there were you call them what, babas, the grandmas that come, and it's basically a farmer's market.
Yeah.
But it was nice because it didn't seem like, we have farmer's markets now in LA that it almost kind of seems like a trendy, cool thing to do.
Right.
And I'm like, these guys aren't even farmers.
No.
These are hipsters selling vegetables.
And it's probably expensive.
It's really expensive.
Here's my organic, whatever. The stuff at this Baba's Market was also probably organic, picked recently, but I think they were given prices today, and it's pennies.
Yeah. So the restaurant.
Oh, the restaurant. What was the name, by the way? We keep saying the restaurant.
I can't pronounce it anyway, so it actually doesn't matter.
Okay.
But
it's whatever TripAdvisor has as the number one restaurant.
well, so what I'm going to do is if you guys go to johnnyfd.com/Ukraine, I added it to my Ukraine guide that I had written about Odessa and Kiev last year, but I'll add Lviv to it as well.
Perfect. So, yeah, we were saying great food. Your breakfast, what did you have?
So mine was a breakfast buffet.
Yeah.
That everything's included, even vodka, which is so weird because I'm like, who's drinking vodka at 8 in the morning?
Did you drink vodka?
I didn't drink any vodka.
Were people drinking vodka?
I don't think anyone near me was.
Yeah.
But they had vodka, champagne, and beer included in this meal, along with like teas and different juices and coffee. But what I got was, first I went to the egg bar where there's a guy making whatever kind of eggs you want, omelets, or I just had some sunny side up. Then there was a crepe bar. Sure. Where they had both sweet and savory crepes. Mm-hmm. And I had one of the best ones I've ever had in my life. It was chicken and mushroom in these crepes. It was so good that I went back. Mm-hmm. Then they have a whole salad bar with like cold salads, deviled eggs, and they had a big pastry bar. It wasn't a gigantic buffet, but it was all very high quality food. And it kind of reminded me of a breakfast at like a really expensive hotel. Yeah. So if you were to pay like $30 for breakfast at like the Four Seasons or something of that caliber, it felt exactly the same. Yeah. With the wait staff being super professional.
Mm-hmm. My coffee came on a silver platter. Okay. Or silver looking platter.
So this is actually one of the more expensive places
I would imagine.
In Lviv. I would say it's probably, I don't want to say I don't know if it's the most expensive, but it's rated, almost number one on TripAdvisor, if not number one.
And it's fancy looking.
And it's very fancy.
It's fancy. It's like, it's high quality food.
Yeah. So this is this most expensive, like imagine the most expensive brunch you would have in your home city or in San Francisco or New York that would normally cost maybe $30 to $50 and probably wouldn't include alcohol.
We're really building this up.
Yeah. And it wasn't cheap it wasn't like pennies, but it was only $4.60.
Is that what it was for?
Yeah. $4.62.
Ooh. Now I had the lunch and mine was $8.70. but it would have only been just over $5. But my cup of coffee was a little over $1, and so was a bottle of water. But the dish was a little over $5.
Well, I've noticed that most dishes at like normal restaurants, everything's separate. So that's kind of a weird thing for a lot of Americans, where we kind of, when you order, let's say, like a steak, you think it's going to come with all the sides, but here everything's separate. The nice thing is pretty much every single side is $1. So whether you want a salad or a soup or like a baked potato or whatever it is, everything's $1. Water's $1. Beer's probably $1. So it's basically kind of just like the whole country's $1 menu. Yeah.
It's like the dollar menu.
Yeah.
Across the street from that place, they have this new beer theater that wasn't here when I was here, but it's one of the only craft breweries I've seen in Ukraine, and it's a great brewery. They have a guy that was brewing microbreweries in the States, and then they brought a great chef in. It's 3 floors. They have a band that plays from like 7 to 9 o'clock, like a brass band. The second and third floor are open, so you can hear the band from every level. It's like this hip-looking place. I ate there last night. I drank 4 of their craft beers. I got a little carried away. And I had Beagles, which was like this delightful sausage with sauerkraut with potatoes on bread with this great sauce. It was amazing. And my bill was $8.70.
So per beer, how much was that?
It was just over $1.
And this is for nice craft
that would
beer.
have been $50 at that same place in the United States. Easy.
So I think one of the reasons why things are so cheap here, I think it's a combination of a couple things, right? One is the salaries are low. I think the average salary in Ukraine is $200 a month.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
And even doctors are making a couple $100 a month, way less than 1,000. And the second, their currency for the longest time was for $1 you would get 7 or 8.
Yeah.
How do you call it? Lviv? Hryvnia. Yeah. And that was the case when you were living here for a couple of years, right?
Yeah, it was just below 8.
Okay. Now, and for the last year or two, because their economic system's not very stable, there's the problems with Russia and kind of all these other factors, their money is now worth 1 to 26.
Mostly because of problems with Russia. Yeah.
And that means for us that for every dollar that we change, we basically get $3 for free. So our money is essentially worth, 3 times as much as it should be or it used to be.
Yeah. It goes a long ways.
And things are cheap.
And things are just cheap.
So you get that double whammy where there's places that have, good exchange rates, but it doesn't matter if you're getting $1 for X amount of Vietnamese dong if things are still expensive.
Right.
But it's that double whammy where things are cheap and you're getting a great exchange rate.
Yeah. Yeah. You can have a heyday. You can go to you can do anything you want. It's just, you're going to have a hard time getting rid of money.
Well, the funny thing is the first ATM I went to, the airport, the maximum withdrawal limit was 1,000.
Yeah, I saw that too.
And I was like, well, I need cash. So at first I was like, is this even enough for me to get into the city? Cause
$50.
No, it's $40, right?
40, yeah.
And to put this in perspective, in New York, to get from JFK to anywhere, it's a flat rate of $55.
Yeah.
And it's in LA to get from LAX to, where people actually live. So I was visiting my cousin and Uber was $70. So in these cities, I would have been screwed. I wouldn't even have had enough money to get from the airport to the hostel or the hotel. But here, I took out $40 and I had $39.93 left.
And on top of that, like it's cheap, but I think Lviv is this interesting place too. It's the most European looking city, I think, in Ukraine because it's so far west. It used to be Polish. We met on this culture tour today. And so it used to be part Polish. It's been kind of run by different countries at different times. And now it kind of sits at the heart of like Ukrainian culture, especially the people in Western Ukraine really champion it as like, that's their Ukrainian city. But it's one of my favorite cities to wander around. Part of it's nostalgia because it's the old Peace Corps days. But part of it, I had said earlier today, it feels like walking down all these windy streets that there's something hidden like in every corner.
And there is.
And the best part is that there is.
Well, what's crazy is when I was walking around yesterday trying to find a restaurant, because I was hungry, I arrived, I was like, let me just get some food. And I walked by some places and I'm like, okay, let me just kind of randomly eat somewhere. It's not a big deal. And the ones that you see that you walk into are probably just going to be okay. Like the food was okay. Everything was tasty. But the real special restaurants are the ones that don't have English signs, like the one that we went to for breakfast I can't pronounce.
Yep.
And then there's all these secret theme restaurants.
Right.
Which we are going to go to one tonight.
Yes. And that one I've never been to before.
So the way I found it was very random.
Yeah.
I was Googling, I used Google Maps to see where I was staying and I dropped a pin, just so I can know where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that somebody had dropped a pin nearby, which would look like a pin, but it turns out it was actually the name of the restaurant. But somebody had dropped a pin and labeled it the most expensive Galatian restaurant. Yeah. And Galatian, I think, just means what? Old Lviv or old region area?
I don't know.
I think from what I know, this region used to be Galatian or something like that. And I was like, what kind of label or pin is this? So I decided to click in. I read some reviews about the place, and turns out it's a whole experience.
Yeah.
So how did you find out about it? What did you hear about it?
So to make this story kind of a little longer, I remember walking around this city when I was a volunteer, and I got $200 a month, and most of it went to pay this lady that I lived with for rent and food, and so I could eat at the cheap places. But I was always thinking, man, it would be awesome to just come here and do like a food tour when I had a real job and I could just do whatever I want to. And so I kind of decided that's what I'm going to do this weekend. And so I was in the Kyiv airport, kind of doing research on, I kind of cross-referenced Lonely Planet and TripAdvisor, and this one came up, and it seemed quirky, and it seemed something very Lviv, because there's a handful of other restaurants that are kind of similar.
So there's one in the old Jewish quarter, where you have to negotiate the price of your bill.
Have you been there?
No. It sounds like a nightmare to me. I think for other people it's fun because that just never happens. You never go to a restaurant and be like, no, I want a discount on my bill. It's too expensive. It's normally, let's say it's $100. Then you're like, no, I only want to pay 50.
It was fun as a Peace Corps volunteer because we really didn't want to spend much money because we didn't have it. So I remember some of the volunteers like really getting into it with the waiter because it was like, I think usually it's kind of this friendly, it's kind of funny, but it was not funny for a couple moments. But they'll do something good. They'll say like, okay, well, how about this price? And then we'll give you a gift. And they gave us like a couple shots and they told us it was brewed with, the kind of curly locks that the Orthodox Jews have. I think there's probably a little bit of stereotyping that goes into the Jewish restaurant. It's not run by Jewish people. So there's that. But it's quite an experience.
That's funny. But actually, I think in some cultures, people just like getting a good deal. I think in some cultures, it's like if you don't haggle or negotiate, then you feel like you got ripped off. Even though the let's say printed price or advertised price is a great price, people still feel like they get ripped off if they don't get like an additional discount. Right. And this actually happened to me when I was working as a dive master in Thailand, and I would get Chinese customers from mainland China, and they would always say to me, like, what was funny is I didn't know the word for, can you give me a discount? Because I had literally never asked in that way for a discount for anything. Right. I think I knew how to say like, oh, that seems a bit expensive. Can you do this price? But there was actually a word called, in Chinese, it's dazi, which means like hit, I don't know, actually I don't know what, but it basically means like percentage off or something. Mm-hmm. And they would say, oh, can you dazi? And I'm like, what is that? And they would be like, oh, can you hook me up a bit? And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And they would get so confused because they're like, oh, I guess this guy really just doesn't give discounts.
Discount. That usually works here. Discount. You tell them discount. They know what that means. Discount.
Yeah, but I was like, no, this is a scuba diving center. Like, this is a fixed price.
Yeah, we don't.
Like, it's like going to a museum and be like, $8 is too much. Can you bring it down? But I feel like in some cultures, people are happier if you mark up the price a bit and then give them
some people
that money
like
off
the thrill of the bargain. Yeah.
I hate it.
I'm just a terrible bargainer.
I'm great at it. I'm actually I'm fantastic at bargaining. I just feel like if I'm going to spend that much energy trying to save, 10% or something off of something, I almost might as well use that same energy to like sell something or make some money at work.
Yeah, I sometimes think like, so on my cab ride, I thought like, well, is it worth $4 to sit there and haggle with this guy who's going to drive me across the town for $8 when I have the $4? Or should I just do it?
But here's the thing is, even more than I hate haggling is I hate getting ripped off. Like, I despise it. Even if like, it's not even about the money. Even if I have the money, I just hate getting ripped off.
I agree.
So it's funny that one person's like entertainment, I guess, would be someone else's nightmare.
Yeah.
But not judging anyone because, just kind of like I said earlier in the episode is everyone has a different cup of tea.
Yep. Different cup of tea.
Yeah. So the restaurant we're going to go to for dinner might not be everyone's cup of tea because when you walk in, it's not a nice restaurant. It is some guy's living room, I heard.
And he's like old and kind of grouchy, and he tries to not let you in, is what I've heard. And you have to argue your way in.
Yeah. And I've heard once you get in, he says, well, maybe I can give you a potato. and he's like in his sleepwear, and you're like, in this crappy old apartment, and this guy is offering you a potato for dinner, and you're like, okay. And if you accept it, he then says, oh, okay, well, let's go sit in the other room because this living room is a bit small. And he opens the door, and it's this fine dining restaurant
where everything is marked up 90%.
Well, that would mean it's marked up like 1,000%. They add 2 zeros.
They give you a 90% discount at the end on everything you see on the menu.
So imagine going to a restaurant in New York at New York's kind of hard to say because things are that expensive anyways. Okay, let's say you go to TGI Fridays in Fargo and you see that a burger is $140 or actually $1,400 and you're like, what is this? Right. But then at the end, when you get the bill, they like cross off 2 zeros.
Yeah. Should be good.
Yeah. I'm excited for that. To me, that's fun.
Yeah. And that's kind of fixed at the start. You know that so you can do the math. At the Jewish restaurant, you had no clue. And it really could go either way. I've heard people that have gotten good deals, and I've heard people that actually kind of ended up spending more than they wanted to. Yeah. Which is, I guess that's a different adventure. Other adventures in town. Oh, there's the Nationalist Bar, where you have to know the password to get in. And it's kind of made in the theme of the Ukrainian Nationalist Army, who is led by Stepan Bandura. My history's, I think, is mostly right. That during World War II, West Ukraine was the battleground between Germany and the Soviet Union. Yeah, Soviet Union, which isn't good. They had a hard time with that. But this guy, he rose the Ukrainian National Army, and they decided they were going to fight both the Germans and the Russians, and they were going to have Ukraine be their own. Nobody was going to take it. They were going to take it. He didn't win, but he did get his statue put up in, I think, about every town in Western Ukraine. And so this bar is kind of themed after the Ukrainian Nationalist Army. And it's like a little bunker. They have like these kind of the guns from the era, the uniforms. You can put them on, get your picture taken. But the guy at the door will ask, you knock on the door and he opens kind of like, this little window so he can peek out. And you have to say, Slava Ukraina. And they say, Heroem Slava, which is you're saying glory to Ukraine. And he says, glory to the heroes. When I was here earlier, they would sometimes ask you, Vi Moskvali, which is their derogatory term for a Russian. You had to tell them.
Are you Russian?
Yeah, like their nasty word for Russian. You had to say, no, I am not. And
what if you actually were Russian?
That's a great question. Like, I think there's a good chance that they wouldn't let you in. But I'm not sure. But because that's most of like the Ukrainian national sentiment is definitely directed towards not being part of Russia.
Well, what was crazy is when I was in Odessa and Kiev, a lot of people spoke Russian and I didn't understand what it was. And turns out that during the Soviet occupation, just like how they moved people from Poland to Lviv, what they did was they moved Russian people into Ukraine and then, move people, just here and there. Yep. So it wasn't their fault. They're just like, civilians or villagers, and they grew up in Ukraine. Yep. But with the Russian culture and the language, and they might have been here for 2 generations.
Yeah.
So in their mind, they're like,
that's what I know.
this is who I am. Yeah. I am from Ukraine and we speak Russian and this is what we do. Mm-hmm. And now that, the USSR has been dismantled and it's Ukraine again, it's really hard for people who grew up speaking Russian with that Russian culture to be like, okay, now we get rid of the Russian language. Let's all speak Ukrainian.
I think they're both official languages. I might be wrong, but I think they both are. Because in the Far East, they speak all Russian. In the middle, they call it Surgic, and it's a mix of the two. In the West, especially like in this area, they kind of pride themselves on they call it Чистый Украинский мова, the clean Ukrainian language that they speak here. But in Soviet times, it was all Ukraine. They spoke Russian at work. You had to. And so people in this part of the country, they might speak Ukrainian at home, but they had to. And school was in Russian. And so that's just the language everybody had to know it. Even over here, they do.
So I understand from a Ukrainian's point of view why they would want to speak Ukrainian, even if they can, to kind of take back the culture of the country. Mm-hmm. I understand the people that grew up with the Russian culture, not wanting to, to change and, basically take on a different cultural identity that they're used to. But I'm just glad I'm not in the middle of it because I think it's a difficult situation.
Yeah, I think so. And I guess I haven't been here for 5 years, so I guess I don't know, but there's definitely some tension.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because as soon as I posted on Facebook that I was coming to Ukraine, friends are freaking out. Even though my friends travel a lot,
right.
They know I've been to so many countries. Like when they hear Ukraine, they're like, "Oh my god!"
Right.
Isn't that in the middle of a war?
Right.
Isn't it crazy? And at least in Lviv, where we are now, it is just as safe and peaceful as pretty much anywhere in the U.S.
Yeah, it's fine. The trouble's all on the other side. I don't know.
But even Kiev, when I was there last year, when I was in Odessa, it was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I mean, unfortunately, I think the only, if you're right on the border of Russia or you're in Crimea, then it's probably not fine. But I think this is a great place to come visit.
Totally safe.
It's safe. People are super friendly. It's cheap. It's beautiful. The food's good. It's not it's not as easy to order food or get around or read signs like it would be in Western Europe, where at least they have a Latin-based, was it Roman font?
Yeah.
Writing style?
Latin letters.
Yeah, Latin alphabet.
Yeah.
But this really is kind of I don't want to say untouched, but like less discovered part of the world.
Yeah. And I think that part of it makes it kind of fun too. It's not London that everybody's seen or other places in Western Europe. There's not lines to do everything. It's not crowded like Western Europe. You kind of feel like you're in it. Because most of the people we see on the street are Ukrainians.
Yeah, even the tourists.
Yeah, most of the tourists are Ukrainian tourists.
Yeah.
There's a handful of non-Ukrainian tourists, but there's not a ton.
But when you say handful, like you literally mean like 5.
Like you can count them on your hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. But with a little help getting around the train service around Ukraine has now gotten easier. They have a website in English so you can navigate that. It's definitely doable. You have to be a little adventurous, but you can do it.
Yeah, it's definitely doable. It's definitely one of the most difficult places I've traveled to.
Yeah.
Even way more difficult than like Thailand, where I can't read Thai.
Thailand's set up for tours.
Tour, yeah.
They have that's a well-oiled machine. They have there.
But I would say anywhere in Southeast, anywhere in Asia is far easier.
They'll put a sticker on you, and you just raise your hand, and you're set.
Yeah, and here I think the hardest part is because you can't just type in like let's say I want to look up a restaurant or go somewhere. I can't just type in the name because it's not the Roman alphabet.
Yeah.
It's in Cyrillic, which looks like something from Space Invaders.
Yep.
But I think it's worth coming to.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think I still think Lviv is one of my favorite cities. I've seen a lot of cities. I love coming to.
I think if you guys want an easier to travel to version of Lviv, go to Krakow, Poland.
Yes.
They look actually kind of similar. It has kind of a similar feel to it. Things are also cheap there. People are also nice. So go there first if you are kind of unsure how adventurous you are. And then if you like that place, then you could take a train over to
quick overnight
Lviv.
train to Lviv.
Yeah.
That's all you have to do.
It's travel tip of the day. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. This was
fun.
fun.
That was fun, right?
Yeah.
That's fun. Are you on social media at all? Like Instagram, Twitter? Do you blog, anything?
No.
peacecorps.com/Ryan Murfield.
I don't really have anything to promote.
Yeah, that's cool. You know what? If you guys want to find Ryan, you have to just travel and find him somewhere in the world.
Yeah.
I love it. All right. Well, thanks to everyone for listening, and big thank you to everyone who's left these amazing 5-star reviews of the podcasts. This week, I want to thank Alvin4J from Australia. He says, inspiring 5 stars. Thank you, Johnny, for being so transparent in both your blog and this podcast. You're a great ambassador for digital nomads and an inspiration to many of us who wishes to get in the same path you have helped pave. Thanks, Alvin. And big thank you to our sponsor, TripStreak. The next time you guys need to book a flight out to here to Ukraine or to anywhere else that we've talked about, check out tripstreak.com/travel like a boss. See all of you guys next week. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Travel Like a Boss podcast. If you want to hear more, including the bonus How to Choose the Perfect Niche episode, join our mailing list at travellikeabosspodcast.com. See you next week, and remember, if you want to travel like a boss, you need to be your own boss. So start your online business today and start living the lifestyle you've always dreamed of.